On the night of April the 10th of 2022, Stephanie Melgoza dialed 911 to report that she'd crashed her car outside the Full Throttle bar in East Peoria, Illinois. When officers arrived at the scene, they came upon the young woman's red Dodge Dart, completely wrecked with a severed leg sticking out of the grille. Melgoza, at the time in her early 20s, watched with callous indifference as first responders attempted to resuscitate a couple in critical condition whom she'd struck outside the bar. The victims, identified as 43-year-old Andrea Rosowitz and Paul Prowant, aged 55, were both pronounced dead at the scene. Melgoza admitted to consuming 3 vodka drinks that evening, but indicated she was just getting her night started. Law enforcement found an open bottle of Tito's vodka on the floor of her vehicle. Melgoza seemed wholly oblivious to the extremely grave nature of the situation, as she smiled and joked with officers at the scene. In body cam footage, she was shown giggling as she struggled to complete field sobriety tests. When she was unable to follow an officer's flashlight with her eyes, she said, "I told you it's hard." Melgoza was eventually brought to OSF St. Francis Hospital, where her blood alcohol level registered at 0.264, more than 3 times the legal limit. The disturbing body cam footage continued at the hospital as the suspect failed to display any semblance of remorse or concern for the 2 people she'd killed. She even expressed excitement for an upcoming trip to Las Vegas she had planned, saying, "It's going to be so fun. I'm going to start off with 2 Long Islands." In response, an officer asked, "You haven't had enough of drinking already?" To which Melgoza replied with a laugh, "We're talking about Vegas. There's no limit in Vegas, right?" In the spring of 2023, the young woman pled guilty to 4 felony charges, including 2 counts of aggravated DUI death. She was consequently sentenced to 14 years in prison. As her punishment was being handed down, Melgoza tearfully apologized for her actions, vowing never to drink alcohol again. Number 7. Shanda Johnson Williams. Oklahoma man Jamie Williams was found unresponsive at his Fort Towson residence on November the 17th of 2019. The 48-year-old had been stabbed numerous times with a fillet knife by his wife, Shanda Johnson Williams, who was also 48 at the time. When law enforcement came upon the victim, they called emergency medical crews to the scene. However, by the time paramedics arrived, Williams had already succumbed to his wounds. 2 days later, Johnson Williams was located at another Fort Towson home and was arrested on first-degree murder charges. The woman subsequently made headlines for her behavior while being taken into custody. Specifically, when her mugshot was captured, she sported a grin, seemingly unaware of or undeterred by the unfeeling nature of the expression given the circumstances. The resulting murder trial commenced in September of 2022 in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Oklahoma in Muskogee. According to a press release by the U.S. Attorney's Office, which prosecuted the case, Johnson Williams was ultimately found guilty of voluntary manslaughter. The punishment stemming from the conviction wasn't disclosed. Number 6. Dhaval Kumar Patel. In the early hours of May the 2nd of 2022, deputies from the Laurel County Sheriff's Office in Kentucky were called to a parking lot off Highway 312 near the City of London. The office had received numerous complaints that night about a suspicious vehicle. Upon arrival at the scene, deputies encountered 34-year-old Dhaval Kumar Patel from Mount Juliet, Tennessee. The man was seated behind the wheel of a black Chevrolet Traverse with an open container of alcohol in the center console. It was determined that Patel was in fact intoxicated, and he was consequently taken into custody. According to police records, the man protested his arrest, claiming he hadn't been aware that drinking and driving was against the law. His baffling ignorance wasn't enough to keep him from being charged with operating a motor vehicle under the influence and possession of an open alcoholic beverage container in a motor vehicle. Number 5. Jeffrey Guy Sass. Shortly after 5 a.m. on November the 1st of 2015, a burglary alarm drew the police in Portland, Oregon, to the upscale multi-level Orchard Supply hardware store on Northeast Halsey Street. Responding officers immediately noticed obvious signs of a break-in and took note of a vehicle parked outside the building. Upon entering the store, law enforcement heard someone rummaging around and subsequently came upon a male suspect attempting to open a safe near the cash registers. The man, identified as 43-year-old Jeffrey Guy Sass, had targeted the establishment, which reportedly sold standard hardware merchandise such as hammers and fertilizers, as well as high-end lawn equipment, boutique patio furniture, and holiday decor displays. Sass allegedly hadn't anticipated that breaking into the store would trigger an alarm, which was why he'd remained inside long enough for police to arrive. He was arrested and charged with burglary, criminal mischief, and possession of burglary tools. Number 4. Thomas Allen Waits. 69-year-old Thomas Allen Waits got behind the wheel of his 2005 GMC Canyon pickup on the night of June the 29th of 2019. The man had reportedly consumed alcohol earlier in the evening but thought he felt well enough to drive. After Waits drove up a hill and went around a bend in the road, he entered the path of an oncoming motorcycle at the intersection of West Roller Coaster Road and North Grand Avenue. In Tucson, Arizona, the two vehicles collided, ejecting 41-year-old Benjamin Chavez and Lydia Carter, aged 53, off the bike. Pima County Sheriff's deputies responded to the scene and found both Chavez and Carter with severe injuries. They were both ultimately pronounced dead. Chavez at the scene and Carter at a local hospital. Law enforcement also made contact with Waits, who was standing near his truck and seemingly unaware of the carnage he'd caused. Despite realizing that he'd hit something, the man neglected to look for any casualties or investigate the crowd of people that had formed near where the riders landed. Waits told officers that he didn't feel the effects of the alcohol he drank, but was nevertheless arrested on charges of driving under the influence and criminal damage, in addition to 2 counts of manslaughter. Number 3. Jacqueline J. Wells. A retired Illinois police captain named Andrew Toll hopped on his bicycle and went for a ride in Galesburg, a small city about 50 miles outside of Peoria, on May the 9th of 2017. As he pedaled down a rural road near a boat launch on Lake Bracken, a red Jeep pulled up alongside him. The woman behind the wheel started honking her horn and yelling profanities at Toll before ramming the vehicle into him, knocking him off the bike. The motorist, subsequently identified as Jacqueline J. Wells, then proceeded to run the retiree over as she sped off. 61-year-old Toll was taken to the hospital with broken bones in his arms and legs, as well as a fractured pelvis. Shortly after medical crews had arrived to treat the man, Wells was spotted dragging his bicycle beneath her Jeep on the roadway nearby. She was arrested on several charges, including attempted murder, aggravated reckless driving, failure to stop after a crash causing injury, and 4 counts of aggravated battery. In her booking photo, Wells flashed a toothy smile, appearing jovial despite the violent crime she had just committed. In June of 2018, the woman was deemed mentally fit to stand trial. However, following court proceedings in November, a circuit judge overlooked the initial ruling and found Wells not guilty by reason of insanity. Citing testimony from doctors and witnesses, the decision was met with controversy, with critics contending that the burden of proving insanity is normally left to the defense. Nevertheless, the prosecution declined to challenge the judge's decree. Wells was detained at a mental health facility, having been ordered to undergo a specific treatment plan, the details of which weren't disclosed to the public. Today, we wanted to thank superfan Kevin Lee for his super thanks. We'll be sure to keep the videos coming. Everything from as little as a thumbs up goes a long way in supporting the channel. Number 2. Anjanette Marie Welk. In May of 2018, a devastating traffic collision occurred on US Highway 27 in Marion County, Florida. 60-year-old Sandra Clarkston had been in the passenger seat of her car as her teenage daughter was driving. They were stopped at a red light when a Chevy Avalanche traveling at approximately 73 miles per hour suddenly rear-ended them. The impact sent Clarkston's car into the back of a tractor-trailer. The woman was hospitalized in critical condition, and although her daughter survived the incident, she was pronounced dead 4 days later. The individual behind the wheel of the Avalanche was identified as Ocala resident Anjanette Marie Welk, at the time in her mid-40s. Responding law enforcement noted that Welk was acting lethargic, slurring her words, and smelled of alcohol. She failed the ensuing sobriety test, and her BAC was measured to be roughly twice the legal limit. In the mugshot she took after being taken into custody, Welk displayed a wide smile and tilted her head as though posing for the camera. The picture sparked outrage among those who found her chipper demeanor insensitive and ignorant as to the seriousness of her actions. A week later, upon being bonded out, Welk married her 46-year-old partner after quickly obtaining a marriage license. With a judge's permission, the couple subsequently moved to Washington state. The woman was tried for the deadly crash in May of 2019. She pleaded no contest to a count of DUI manslaughter and 2 counts of DUI with property damage. The presiding justice subsequently sentenced her to 11 years behind bars. Following her release, Welk would reportedly be subject to probation for 15 years. We have our release from a while back about when deranged people go wrong lined up for you after number 1. Stay tuned if you'd like to watch some more TWKY content today. Number 1. Tahira Ahmad. A girl from Tulsa, Oklahoma, was taken to the hospital after being viciously stabbed by her mother on the night of May the 14th of 2018. The victim remained in critical condition with stab wounds to the torso, as well as puncture wounds to the legs, neck, hands, and face. Her mother, 39-year-old Tahira Ahmad, subsequently abducted her youngest daughter, triggering an Amber Alert in the area. The woman was located in a Tulsa parking lot the following afternoon. Her child was successfully recovered and determined to be unharmed. Ahmed smiled while being taken into custody and openly confessed to her crimes. She stated she'd become agitated with her 3 children, prompting her to bound them with duct tape. The eldest child fought back, at which point Ahmed reportedly hit her over the head with a pickaxe and stabbed her over 50 times. She then set the house on fire and fled with her youngest daughter in tow. The middle child managed to escape and alert the neighbors, who came upon her older sister in the burning home and brought her to the hospital. Ahmed was charged with assault and battery with a deadly weapon with intent to kill, first-degree arson, and abuse of a child. During interrogation, the woman described her oldest child as the devil and claimed to have tried to kill her out of fear for her own safety. The following April, Ahmed entered a blind plea, preventing her children from having to testify against her. She was ultimately found guilty of the counts levied against her and was consequently sentenced to 3 concurrent life terms plus 10 years, all but assuring she spends the remainder of her days on earth behind bars. Subsequent reports confirmed that the eldest daughter had survived her catastrophic injuries and was recovering. Number 7. Incident in Carrizo Springs. A video from an arrest on the U.S.'s southern border taken in January of 2022 showed an accused people smuggler growling and lunging towards officers. Immigrant smugglers are colloquially known as coyotes, and the arrested woman's behavior seemed to emulate that of the wild animal. A video of the incident was captured by an agent assigned to the Del Rio sector's Carrizo Springs station in Texas. After she was handcuffed and while she was being put in a van, the unnamed woman refused to respond to Border Patrol officers' commands. She blankly stared at the ground, ignoring requests to put her feet in the vehicle. She then let out a loud noise, growled, and lunged at law enforcement. She continued making animal noises as officers tried to press the door on her, fearing that she would try to flee. It was only after law enforcement warned her she'd be shot with a taser that the smuggler gave the first hint of compliance by stating that she didn't understand what they were telling her. Number 6. Jessica Vega. 35-year-old Texas woman Jessica Vega tried to kidnap a young girl from a San Antonio Walmart in early September of 2022. She pushed the child's older sibling's hands off the shopping cart and began to walk away while the toddler was still in the child's seat. Their 28-year-old mother, who wasn't named, went after Vega as she was walking away with her daughter, but the latter refused to return the child. She allegedly told the mother, "Just because she's yours doesn't mean I can't take her." Witnesses and store staff successfully intervened, and Vega fled on foot but was later arrested on a charge of attempted kidnapping. In the incident's aftermath, Vega's ex-husband, Michael O'Connell, talked to the media and described the woman as a sick, twisted individual, revealing the physical and psychological torment she'd put him through. After the birth of their daughter in the late 2000s, Vega became more paranoid and violent. She constantly accused O'Connell of cheating and, in various incidents, physically attacked him. O'Connell reported that in one case, Vega badly beat herself up, trying to get him arrested for domestic violence, and he woke up with 9 officers pointing their guns at him. They moved past the incident when Vega became pregnant for a second time and told O'Connell he was the father, which a DNA test later disproved. Still, he decided to remain in the child's life. Then in 2010, Vega claimed she was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and O'Connell felt he could no longer walk away from the relationship. They got married and went on a Caribbean honeymoon using the bulk of the $13,000 in donations that people had sent in for Vega's treatment. 3 months later, O'Connell learned that Vega had lied about the disease and ended their marriage. The woman went on to be indicted on charges of fraud and grand larceny. O'Connell revealed that she painted him as a monster during the custody battle for their daughter and was eventually granted full rights. Then, whenever the man wanted to visit his child, Vega would make him have intercourse with her first. Eventually, Vega's mother was given temporary emergency custody of her children. Her pre-trial hearing on the attempted kidnapping charge was set for October of 2022. Number 5. Andrew Abdullah. On May the 22nd of 2022, New York City man Daniel Enriquez was on his way to brunch on a Manhattan-bound Q train. The 48-year-old Goldman Sachs employee was on the last car where another man, Andrew Abdullah, was pacing back and forth and mumbling to himself. As later reported by the authorities, the only discernible words that 25-year-old Abdullah was heard saying was "no phones." He then walked up to Enriquez, a complete stranger to him, and shot him once in the chest at point-blank range. The police arrested the suspect at the Legal Aid Society offices in Manhattan, while his surrender to Mayor Eric Adams was being negotiated. Taking part in the talks on behalf of Abdullah was the mayor's longtime friend, Lamar M. Whitehead, a controversial Brooklyn bishop known for flaunting his luxurious lifestyle. He and Abdullah's lawyers later complained that he'd been arrested during negotiations, claiming he'd been ambushed by the NYPD. Abdullah had been on the run since the shooting and the subject of a citywide manhunt. He was reported to be suffering from mental health issues and allegedly didn't remember killing Enriquez, while his criminal record showed he'd been arrested 19 times since 2015. Number 4. Jeremy Garnier. In 2020, Facebook Live users stumbled upon the video of a man dressed up as a Batman villain, threatening to go out in public and kill people until his stream reached 1,000 watchers. In between puffs from a glass bong, Missouri man Jeremy Garnier expressed an intention to take over the world while wearing makeup and clothes, emulating the Joker. The 48-year-old, a prolific battle rapper with a small online following, then took his act on the road. He posed for photos and freestyle rapped at the St. Louis Mall before going to the Del Mar Loop, an arts and restaurant area in the city's northeast. He ordered a Sprite at the Blueberry Hills bar, claiming that he couldn't be intoxicated while intending to kill a bunch of people, all the while checking in with his viewership. Garnier told them that the reason he'd captured their attention was part of an effort to end the opioid epidemic plaguing U.S. society, describing it as the leading killer in people under 50 years of age. However, he then went on to reaffirm an intention of killing people. The police, who'd become aware of his deranged stream, arrived at the establishment and placed Garnier in handcuffs, charging him with one felony count of making threats and labeling him a danger to the community. His booking photo showed the man still wearing his makeup while displaying a wide smile, while some insisted that he was merely playing a character for attention and even expressed support for the former addict's mission of fighting the opioid crisis. Others were unnerved by his threats and frightening appearance. Number 3. Rachelle Waterman. 48-year-old Alaska woman Lori Waterman went missing in November of 2004, and her remains were subsequently found in a minivan that had been abandoned in the woods and set on fire. The investigation that followed revealed that Lori had been killed before being placed in the vehicle, in an attempt to disguise her murder as a car accident. Suspicions fell on the woman's teenage daughter, Rachelle, who ran a blog called My Crappy Life, chronicling numerous conflicts between her and Lori. Some of them stemmed from Rachelle's feelings of isolation in the small town of Craig, while others were focused on the mail company she kept and recent interests in the pagan religion of Wicca. Rachelle had 2 friends, Jason Arant and Brian Riddell, both of whom she dated and with whom she'd shared stories about her mother abusing her in the household. They became concerned for the teenager's safety, and Rachelle led them to believe that she wanted her mother dead. Arant and Riddell were longtime friends and had reportedly once made a blood oath to help each other if needed. When Rachel and her father were out of town, they kidnapped Laurie and forced her to drink wine so that her death would look like a drunk drive-in accident. Once they were in the woods, Raydell fatally suffocated Laurie before he and the rant set her vehicle ablaze. The two men broke during interrogation and confessed their involvement in the woman's killing. Both eventually pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, for which Raydell was sentenced to 99 years in prison, with release for good behavior possible in 33 years, while Arant was given 50 years with parole available after 16. The duo also testified against Rachel during her legal proceedings, which eventually resulted in a mistrial. Rachel was tried once again and sentenced to 3 years in prison in 2011 after being found guilty of criminally negligent homicide. Number 2. Gary Cabana. The New York Police Department released disturbing footage in March of 2022 showing a deranged man stabbing 2 workers at the Museum of Modern Art in Manhattan. The suspect, identified as 60-year-old Gary Cabana, was reportedly angry that his membership had been revoked following 2 previous incidents of disorderly conduct. When he showed up for a movie screening at around 4 p.m., he was denied entry. In an attack captured by surveillance cameras, Cabana took out a knife and jumped over the reception desk. He cornered 2 terrified employees and started stabbing them. Another worker managed to distract Cabana by throwing a large binder at him, giving the others a chance to escape. The museum was temporarily closed as the authorities believed Cabana was still inside, but surveillance footage later showed him leaving the building. The deranged man's attack had left a 24-year-old woman with knife wounds to her neck and back, while a man also aged 24 was stabbed in the collarbone. They were rushed to the hospital, but their injuries weren't deemed life-threatening. In the aftermath, a user writing as Cabana continued posting to Facebook ramblings about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and that he suffered from bipolar disorder. Some posts claimed there was a conspiracy to ban him from the museum, referring to it as a backstabbing, and then referencing Cabana's spree, claiming, "I don't backstab, I do the front side only." After the incident, Cabana checked into a hotel in Philadelphia under his real name, where he intentionally set fire to one of the rooms. Patrols were ramped up in the city, and officers eventually found Cabana sleeping on a bench at a Greyhound bus station, where they arrested him without incident. Number 1. Ethan Blair Miller. On August the 28th of 2022, Ethan Blair Miller opened fire at a grocery store in Bend, Oregon, killing 2 people and injuring 2 others. The 20-year-old, armed with a shotgun and an AR-15 style rifle, fired into his own Ford F-250 vehicle and then into the parking lot of a Costco. While walking towards the Forum Shopping Center, he reached the west entrance of the Safeway grocery store at around 7:04 p.m., where he gunned down 84-year-old customer Glenn Edward Bennett. Miller moved further into the store, firing his weapons through the aisles as he went. When he reached the produce section, he was stabbed by 66-year-old employee Donald Ray Surratt. He'd been hiding and charged the gunman with a produce knife, trying to disarm him, but was ultimately overpowered and shot dead. Surratt's heroic intervention, as later reported by the authorities, likely prevented further loss of life. Officers responding to a 911 call entered the store from the front and the back. They found Miller dead at 7:08 p.m. Minutes after his spree had begun, 3 Molotov cocktails and a sawed-off shotgun were subsequently recovered from his vehicle. In the months leading up to the mass shooting, Miller had written a manifesto on Wattpad entitled The Downward Spiral of Ethan Miller, a title inspired by the name of a 9 Inch Nails album. He'd written about causing a national tragedy and pondered shooting up his former high school. However, as a former employee of Safeway, he decided on the store, as he no longer wanted to wait for school to begin. Miller cited loneliness and isolation as the reasons for his murderous intentions, writing about the impact of COVID lockdowns, feuds with his family, and the inability of finding a girlfriend. Leave a violent mark on the world, stating, "I am responsible for this, but I was turned into a monster." Thanks for watching. For a year, would you rather be thrust into a foreign culture that deems your home country ignorant, or have to give up all your hobbies and form new ones? Let us know in the comments section below.